Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, we are going to be creating a watercolor floral initial. So exactly what you see on screen is what we're going to be creating together. So this is an example of one. This is an example of one. I also made a mini one and made a Mother's Day card since Mother's Day is coming up. So the exact same techniques and just adhered to a plain folded card. So you could use this for stationery, you can use it for art on your walls at home or gifts. So it definitely has a lot of uses. So I'm going to take you through how I mix my watercolors, how I lay out my initials, and then how I paint everything. So I'm going to walk you through the supplies. Links to everything used throughout this tutorial are available in the video description. There's a link there, so just click that link and you can have access to everything. So for this video, I'm using Arteza's watercolor paper notebook. It's a really beautiful, premium, high quality watercolor notebook. It's cold pressed watercolor paper. It's nice and thick and it's double-sided and cloth bound. And this is really beautiful and it's a great size. It's 8.5 by 11, so it's perfect if you want to hang whatever artwork you create on your walls. It's a really nice size for framed artwork. Or if you want to cut it down and use it for stationery. The watercolors that we're going to be using is this set of 60 Arteza tube watercolors. So you can see there's a ton of colors in here. And if you like mixing colors, you can totally do that. There are a lot of really beautiful already mixed colors, so you can use exactly what they have here if you don't like to mix your own watercolors. So lots of great options for a project like this. So the paint trays that I'm using are these ceramic paint trays. I switched to these a little while ago from the plastic trays that you could get for like $1 at a department store. I really like these because they don't stain, they clean really easily, and they're nice and sturdy. You can't accidentally bump your tray and mix your watercolors together. So I usually keep my main colors up here and then I will create combinations of those colors in these trays right here. So I really love these and would definitely recommend them. And then I'm using these pencils. You'll need a hard and a soft pencil so we can transfer our letter onto our watercolor paper. And I use this Pentel click eraser to erase my pencil marks after we transfer it on. And then I'm using just 2 watercolor paint brushes for this, a number 4 round Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor brush and then a number 0 round brush as well. I've got a pipette, just a basic pipette for transferring water into my palette so I can mix them. And then all you need to do is just print out your favorite letter on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. This is just copy paper, so nothing special about it. This font that I'm using is called Tenez. It's the bold weight of it, and I really like this. It's a beautiful serif typeface that holds up really well for a project like this. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. Once again, just hit the link in the video description. You can have access to all the supplies that are mentioned throughout this video, including this font. All right, so the first thing we need to do is get our letter transferred onto our paper. So I'm going to set this aside. All right, so I'm going to grab a hard and a soft pencil. I'm going to grab my 4B pencil and I'm going to grab my 3H pencil. Your B pencils are your soft lead, your H pencils are your hard lead. And you'll see why we need both of those in just a second. So you're going to take your letter and you're just going to flip it over. And we need to trace the backside of our letter. So if you can't see it very well, that's why I printed mine in black so I can still see it. But if you can't see yours, you can always tape it onto a window and you can transfer it that way. Or if you have a light box, you can use that as well. So you're going to use your soft lead pencil for this. So I'm just going to trace around the outside and once again make sure it's your soft lead pencil. Okay, so now that I have my B all traced, now it's time to transfer it onto our watercolor paper. So I'm going to open up to a new page in here. All right, and now you want to center it the best that you can. So that looks good. And then you're going to take your hard lead pencil and you're just going to trace around it to transfer your soft lead onto the watercolor paper. So you can just draw along the edge and press down, but it can be really hard to match up the line exactly. So I like to scribble along the edge of my letter. And when you do that, you can see it transfers it really well. So I'll just scribble around the whole outside of my B and then I'll be right back. Okay, so once you finish going around your letter, you want to hold your hand on your paper just to make sure everything transferred before you remove it and just pull it back and see that you have an edge everywhere. And this is just your guide, so You just want to make sure you see enough of a line all the way around that you can follow it when you drop in your watercolor, and that looks good. All right, so I'm gonna set that aside. And now we need to mix our watercolors. So I'm gonna put this away for now. We're gonna mix our watercolors. We're gonna practice some foliage and some flowers, and then we will integrate them right into our letter. Okay, so I've got my colors for my foliage, and then I've got colors for, I'm going to do roses, I'm gonna do forget-me-nots, and then we just need the inside of our flowers as well. So I'm gonna show you how I mix my foliage colors, and then I'm just going to speed up the video and take care of these colors separately. So the colors that I'm using for my foliage are eucalyptus, deep green, and stone blue. And I'm going to integrate my eucalyptus in my deep green and my stone blue so they kind of feel like they're all part of the same family, even though they're tonally very similar. So one way to transfer your paint from your tube into your tray without having to squeeze it and then put too much in at a time is you just squeeze a little bit and you can pull it with your paintbrush. So that way you're not pulling out too much, and then just put it in your tray like that. So I'm going to use eucalyptus in both my green and my stone blue. So I'm going to put a little bit in each one of these little wells right here. And put a little extra right here. All right, and I've got a paper towel nearby so I can kind of clean off my brush as needed. And close this one off, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing with putting my deep green and my stone blue. Okay, and with my pipette, I'm just going to put a few drops of water in each of these wells so I can mix everything up. All right, so we're just going to do a quick test to see how well we've mixed our colors. So we want some transparency with these. So I'm just going to paint a few little swatches right here, and you want to see that you can still see through the color, and that's looking really good. You don't want it to be too watery unless you're going for that kind of look. We want enough color here, but we don't want it so opaque that it doesn't look like watercolor anymore. That would be more like gouache. So that looks pretty good. That looks good. And let's see what our blue looks like. Our blue is a little more opaque, but I can still see through it. So that looks good to me. And if we wanted to introduce a fourth color right here, we could take some of our green and put it right here, and then we can grab our blue and mix those two together. So we can kind of get our middle blend between the green and the blue. See what that looks like. Looks like it needs a little extra water. All right, so that looks good. So now we've got a nice little combination of different colors for our foliage. It just adds a lot of more visual interest to have a mixture of different colors for our foliage rather than just green throughout, unless that's a look you're going for. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mix up the rest of these colors. I'm going to give them to you first so you know which I'm using. So for my forget-me-nots, I'm using lavender and indigo. For my roses, I am using rose and wineberry and peach. And then for the middle of my forget-me-nots, I'm using spiced apple. Okay, so now we're just going to practice our foliage and our flowers before we apply them to our letter. So I'm going to walk you through some just basic painting for these. If you've never painted watercolor florals before, that's totally fine. You will definitely be able to do this. So first, let's do some foliage. So you can start with your number 4, and what you're going to do is just grab your color. You're going to press down, make sure you can see this. You can press down, and then you're going to lift up towards the end. So lots of pressure and then a little bit of pressure. Lots of pressure, a little bit. Lots of pressure, a little bit. And that will create your leaves. Just like that. If you'd like to draw them like you would kind of like a pencil or a writing utensil, you can do that too with the number 0. So you're just going to do a pointed oval basically, and then you'll fill it in with your paint. Just like that. So we're just going to repeat the same shape over and over again in different colors and in different sizes and in different transparencies, and that will give us all of our pretty leaves. So you can see kind of what that looks like in these 3 different colors together. So they work really well together. All right, so that's our foliage. Next, we're going to do our forget-me-nots. So forget-me-nots are really easy. You're just going to get some paint on the tip of your brush. I've got my number 4 right here, and you're just going to press down, and you're going to make like a star shape. So 5 times. Press it around, and then you can do the tip if you want. So you can have like some smaller ones. And we've got some purple too that we can do. Okay, and then once these dry, we would drop in our spiced apple color right here for the center. Okay, and now for our roses. The roses are a little bit more complex, so if you don't feel comfortable moving into the roses yet, that's fine. You can just use your forget-me-nots throughout your piece with your leaves, and it'll still look great. So for the roses, I'm going to draw it out so you can kind of see it in pencil first. What you want to do is with a rose, the petals are very tight together in the center, so in order to mimic that, we're just going to use like a U shape, and then we're going to have another U shape like that kind of comes around. And when you come around, you don't want to start at the same spot. So this spot starts right here, and this one starts right here. So they kind of overlap each other, but not directly the same. And as you go out, your U's become a lot larger. So that's kind of what you're going to do with your paintbrush. So you're going to start really tiny, and then you're going to work your way out and make your pieces larger. Just like that. So I'm going to I'll use the number 4 brush so you can see it kind of big. So I'll grab this darker color, tiny U in the center, and then you start making them bigger. And this is a very loose watercolor floral. So it's okay if it looks a little messy. It's totally fine. With a smaller one, it looks a little sketchier, like hand-drawn, which is also a fun look. I like doing the smaller ones a lot. So you can put a bunch of them right next to each other and it'll look like a little arrangement of roses. And then you can just come in with your foliage and give them some leaves. So it looks like they're a cute little arrangement. So these are just basic loose florals right here. So that's basically what we're going to be doing. So we've got our forget-me-nots, our roses, and our leaves, and that's it. So take a minute and practice these out a few times, and once you feel comfortable, then move on to your letter. So I'm going to set this aside, I'm going to bring in my letter, and then we're just going to get started. All right, so I like starting with my flowers. So I will create little clusters of arrangements throughout the letter, and then I fill everything out with the leaves at the very end. So I'm going to start by creating a bunch of clusters of roses throughout my bee. So they're very randomly placed. I'm just randomly selecting an area. There's no really rhyme or reason to it. I just want them pretty spread out. I don't want a bunch that are all next to each other, like a bunch of clusters in one area and then nothing anywhere else. So you'll get the hang of it the more you see. So one other thing I want to mention is you want to change up your scale. So if I've got a bunch of small roses, I want to integrate a larger rose here. So everything looks really dynamic and interesting. If you have them all one size, it won't look very organic or real, or realistic anyway. Okay, and now we're just going to introduce our forget-me-nots, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to kind of spread them out throughout the letter in little clusters. Okay, so now I'm going to let this dry, and after it's dry, then I'm going to come in with my foliage. So I'm going to let this dry and then I'll be right back. Okay, now that all of our flowers are dry, we can begin incorporating our foliage. So I'm going to be using my number 0 brush for this, and the most important thing to remember here is to vary your size and your transparency. So because we're painting the exact same shape over and over again, we're changing up the color, we're changing up the size, and by changing up the transparency as well, which is how much water is in your watercolor as you're painting, you'll add enough variety where it won't look repetitive. It'll just look beautiful and very visually interesting. So just keep that in mind as you paint your different colors. So I'll start with one color, I'll paint it through, and then I'll start integrating the other colors until everything is all filled up. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint this entire letter, and then I will be back. Okay, once all of your foliage is painted in, now we just need to take care of the centers of our forget-me-nots. So I've got my spiced apple color up here, and I'm just going to put a dot in each one of these. Okay, and one other thing you can do if you'd like is to just darken up the centers of your roses. Since everything is folded really tightly in the center, it would make sense to have those colors be just a little richer. So I'll just take the same color and come in and just paint in some extra detail just in the centers of these so they kind of pop a little bit more, giving them that extra depth. And now you just want to wait for everything to dry, and once it is, then you can just erase away your pencil marks. So I will be right back. Okay, everything's dry, so I'm just going to come in with my click eraser and erase away my pencil marks. Okay, so that is how to create a watercolor floral initial using just some basic tube watercolors, 2 brushes, and just some pencils for transferring that serif letter onto your watercolor paper. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe and don't forget to head on over to my site, every-tuesday.com, for even more design and lettering and watercolor floral tutorials, as well as freebies. Once again, the links to everything mentioned within this video is available right in the video description, so just hit that link and you can have access to everything. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.